Great. Well, hello everybody and welcome to today's seminar. The Smart Mobility Connection series is actually our last one of the year, so exciting. I'm Maggie Harger and I'm the 2021 to 2023 University Transportation Center Fellow, so I'm just here today to introduce our guest. The Smart Mobility Connection series is sponsored by the Traffic 21 Institute, as well as the Mobility 21 University Transportation Center, as an opportunity for faculty to showcase their current transportation projects. It's also an opportunity for students, faculty, deployment partners, and the broader community to engage and network with researchers, highlight opportunities for involvement, and foster future interdisciplinary collaboration. Note that this session is being recorded, so if you're on Zoom, your microphone is muted. And now I'd like to introduce today's speaker. Yorie Nakahira is an assistant professor in the Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering at Carnegie Mellon University. She received her BE in Control and Systems Engineering from Tokyo Institute of Technology in 2012, and PhD in Control and Dynamic Systems from the California Institute of Technology in 2019. Her research interests include the fundamental theory of optimization, control, and learning its applications in neuroscience, cell biology, smart grid, cloud computing, finance, and autonomous robots. So please help me welcome Yorie as she tells her about her Universal Transportation Center project, the safety of intelligent systems operating in uncertain and interactive environments.
For the introduction. So in today's talk, I will be introducing some of the recent research projects going on in my group, and the major research is centered on assuring safety for intelligent systems. The motivation of this research is essentially the potential of the intelligent system to change our lives. For example, in autonomous vehicles can possibly change how the transportation operates, and there are also opportunities in collaborative robots and drones, and more generally speaking, a decision making for social and financial systems. And these slides roughly summarize the standard process, starting from the data gathering, system identification, decision making to testing, and using these intelligent system or algorithms in a real world system. And so you can see that there are many challenges or things where the safety could be compromised. And it's just very difficult for a data-driven intelligent system to have a guaranteed safety. And providing safety in the wild is the major focus of today's talk. So the ultimate objective is essentially to provide doable safety in the wild. And this slide summarizes some of the key factors and the challenges associated with safety. So the first one is in terms of the reliability. It's always more straightforward to verify something's working in one setting and telecommunicate, but guarantee that the system is working at all possible settings is significantly more challenging. You can design something that works for a known environment or when everything is predictable. So you can design a safe actions if you know the environment and everything is predictable, but then it's more challenging in a changing environment with a lot of unpredictable things. And for example, safety can be ensured for stable and relatively regular situations, but it could be challenging to ensure safety in an extreme environment. For example, those would include biking an unstable bike in curvy, unpaved, or bumpy roads. And the final factors that's quite relevant is the presence of strategic behaviors of human interactions. If we just naively design a conservative safe actions, we could potentially compromise safety when these kind of actions are going to be exploited by strategic humans. And so these are the relevant factors that show the safety is a multifaceted issue. And my group's research tackles this perspective from these different aspects. And so in today's talk, the talk is organized as follows. So we will first introduce the computational framework that involves decision-making in highly uncertain and interactive or latent environments with a lot of latent risks. And this will involve designing a safe controller, learning to understand the uncertainties and the risks. And on the second part, I will propose a few different additional studies that rethink the fundamentals. So those are things involving, can safe control really result in safe system, or in the current design paradigm, are there anything missing compared with the best performance that can be achieved by humans? And finally, I will introduce some of the quite unconventional applications that we found to be also related to safe learning, and the people in control or safe learning could potentially provide more impact in these areas, but haven't been explored. And so I will start from the probabilistic safety certificate to guarantee long-term. One of the major challenges in achieving long-term safety is essentially coming from the trade-off between the computational burden and the process to estimate long-term safe probability. And this trade, and then you can see that the different existing literature has been living in different space in this trade-off curve. And some of them, such as the usability-based method, they account for long-term safety, but it's very expensive to compute because the number of required trajectories scales exponentially with the time horizon. On the opposite extreme is the type of methods that myopically ensures safety. And for this kind of method, it's very easy to compute because it's myopic. On the other hand, myopic safety doesn't necessarily imply long-term safety, particularly in uncertain environments. And so the diagram on the bottom shows that, for example, if we are going to design a myopic safe controllers, we could have something that will make sure at every state or every time the safe probability is very, the risk probability is very small. However, this will not control how the risk probability accumulates over time. And because of that, you can easily construct an example where the system is safe with high probability at every moment, but it's actually unsafe with probability 1 as you make this time horizon to be sufficiently long. And so this motivates the proposed research where we want to have something that admits a real-time computation using myopic controller at the same time assures long-term safety. And so the major approach or idea we take is as follows. So the equation on the top talks about the standard method that you will use if you want to control myopic safety. So that would be you will define a function phi associated with whether the system is in a safe state X or not. And then look at how this function changes over time and make sure this function, the value of the function doesn't go into the values associated with the unsafe state. But then if we are formulating this safety condition as follows, and this is essentially to formulate safety condition, formulate a forward invariance condition directly on the state space. Things become very difficult for us to trace how the risk probabilities will evolve over time. And instead, we propose and think about how can we formulate the forward invariant condition directly on the probability space. So by formulating this forward invariance condition on the probability space, we can roughly decompose this probability of long-term safety into two terms, using the formula of derivatives. And then the first term captures the long-term safety, where the second term is associated with how the immediate control action will change the state, in the immediate next future. And we can myopically evaluate how the trajectory changes myopically to achieve long-term safety. And so we can show that, under some mild conditions and initial conditions, there are some conditions that we can impose on the long-term safe probability that will ensure that the long-term safe probability satisfies the forward invariant condition, and that will effectively bounce the tail distributions over time to achieve long-term safety. And so to summarize the overall concept, say you have different things that you want to account for, such as system knowledge, parameter uncertainty, local information, or latent risk, or interaction models. We can take those and combine two of the major approaches in the existing literature, the reachability-based approach that is known to ensure long-term safety, and then embed this long-term safe probability into a forward invariant condition directly on the probability space. And because the forward invariance-based approach will allow the system to be evaluated myopically, essentially we only need to look into how the values of the probability changes over time at every moment using a myopic controller, and this is sufficient for us to guarantee long-term safety. And so directly imposing the forward invariant condition on the safe probability will allow us to look at the probability values, either the risk probability or long-term safety probability, as if it's just a state in a standard system, and use a lot of effective techniques to ensure long-term safety. And that depending on what are the how you define the long-term safe probability on which you will want to impose forward invariant condition, you can generalize this basic framework into different variations. And these variations, if we are going to use the formulate into a forward invariant condition on the state space, and look for the probability of these conditions to be satisfied on the state space, will become significantly harder for us to solve. So some of the variations would be, we could consider unmarginalized parameter uncertainty in the long-term probability. And by doing so, we can design a latency critical adaptation method in changing dynamics. And this will have the safety, will have a guaranteed safety. And we could also define a conditional probability of risk event conditioned on the locally available information. And under certain cases, you could have individual agents to run this probabilistic safety certificate locally And you can show that it's sufficient to achieve a system-wide safety specifications. And you can also include things like latent risks in environments where there is pollution, or your belief about the interaction models, for example, between the pedestrian, human drivers, and the autonomous drivers. And in the next few slides, I will introduce the results that we applied this kind of techniques into these different variations, such as extreme driving and the intersection crossing, or the urban driving in a highly polluted and interactive environment. So the first case study is its application to an extreme driving, where this is a situation where this vehicle has to act in a very extreme environment, quite slippery road, and you can see that by accounting for the uncertainties more organically, we can have significantly better performance versus safety trade-off, rather than just formulating this into a deterministic worst-case control method that will end up in a very conservative behavior. And another interesting factor would be the advantage 3, that is the computation cost actually doesn't scale with the time horizon of the model predictive transformer. And by doing so, even if you want to achieve long-term safety, you don't need to use a very long time horizon in model predictive control, and you can reduce your computation. And the second use case is application to intersection crossing. This is an example where the individual agent only have local available information, and there is no centralized computation or centralized algorithms that decide on the path. And it can also create this behaviors where an autonomous vehicle is squeezing in a very crowded intersection. If the safe control techniques are to use deterministic worst case based on the distance, these vehicles won't be able to get closer to humans. But then, in the probabilistic setting, if the vehicles are sufficiently slowly moving, the risk is actually not too much. So this will allow us to produce a behavior where the vehicle is squeezing in to find a feasible solution in a situation where conventional methods cannot find feasible solutions. And the last one is to apply this to a system with latent risk, such as collisions. The accounting for latent risk fundamentally cannot be done using a deterministic worst-case framework, because that will get into very conservative actions. But then human naturally will estimate the probability of somebody coming out of a collision and decides the speed based on this kind of probability. And then so using our techniques, we can have a much better performance and a safety trade-off, and have a less mild degradation of performance as the uncertainties of the latent risk includes. And so the next topic is about how can we compute this long-term safe probability. And then this long-term safe probability will be useful in the probabilistic safety certificate for us. And then so now let us come back to this trade-off curve, where in the computation of long-term safe probability, we are also faced with the exact same issue, where if we want to compute a long-term safe probability, we need to have, for example, using Monte Carlo to run something with a very long time horizon. And that's going to be very expensive. And additionally, the safe probability is related with some rare events, so that additionally makes it very difficult to compute. So we ask these questions: is it even possible for us to, for example, sample a shorter term and then generalize to a much longer term horizon? So if this is possible, that essentially means we can effectively sample a lot in short time scale and be able to understand what is the long-term safe. And the first barrier we came across is this infertibility results. We mentioned this in terms of neural network, but this applies to any functions. In the case that any function, the neural network, so if you are using neural network and we don't have any data, then the error can be infinitely large, and then we just doesn't have any control of the errors between the areas we have samples. But then, however, what we find out is that we can use a physics-informed neural network to achieve this one with provable generalization bound or error bound. So say we have some data generated from some partial state, and we can show that the long-term safe probability is a solution of a partial differential equation PDE. And then we can impose that PDE on a physics-informed neural networks. Due to the presence of the PDE, we can actually show that we can sample short-time horizon to accurately predict the long-term probability. And under some conditions, such as uniqueness that can be characterized, if we can sample partial domains and generalize to the whole domain due to the presence of these PDE constraints. And so we can additionally reduce the dimension. Conventionally, the first PDE we derive scale with respect to the system state. And we can additionally show that we can bound the long-term safe probability of system of arbitrary dimension using another lower bound. And this lower bound is a solution to a two-dimensional PDE. And in this way, the PDE dimension doesn't scale with the original dimension of the system. So this will make it significantly easier for us to compute the long-term safe probability effectively. And here are some of the simulation results that shows it generalized and it can reduce the number of samples in terms of real event. And it can also provide accurate estimation for probability gradient and generalized to unknown, generalized to unknown system parameters. And so that concludes the main part of today's research. Before I end, I would like to propose 3 different locations where I think have a room for us to rethink some of the fundamentals. So as you can see, some of the very common techniques that we can design a safe control method are, for example, deterministic worst case safe control or game theoretic method based on the equilibrium. And our prior work investigated 3 different things. The first one is, will deterministic safe control really give us the safest actions? And the answer was no. Under certain conditions where you can characterize, it actually will increase risk. And we also find, and then the second question would be this equilibrium-based game theoretic-based techniques, if it really offers us the optimum trade-off between safety and performance, and we also find that to also be no. And going there, we think about the different things that we should rethink about what we have been doing in these methods. So we employed a evolutionary game theoretic setting where we consider the human agent and the autonomous agent interacting with each other. So those would be, you have, say, human AD trying to change the lane, or they are sharing a road, and one could act more conservatively and cooperatively, while they can also choose to act more aggressively, for example, to cutting the lanes. And then we will represent those as affected by the game theoretic language. So we characterize the condition, under which the humans are will likely to be encouraged to act more aggressively. And in these conditions, the risk will actually increase over time. And so the standard safe control, they only consider safety at every interaction, but it doesn't account for the long-term influence of, for example, a human could be interacting with autonomous vehicles many, many times over months and years. And this kind of interaction will gradually change their behaviors. And those changes are actually not captured in the safe control framework. But if it doesn't properly account for these kind of long-term influence, we could actually try to design a safe controller that actually results in a greater risk for everybody. And we also realize that if you are going to define the equilibrium-based techniques, because these equilibrium-based techniques are designed for human versus human interaction, so we actually have a larger design space. If we are going to consider human and the AV interactions, this admissible policy isn't necessarily equilibrium in the conventional sense, but it will allow us to have a better safety and the performance trade-offs. And these kind of factors suggest that we need a fundamental rethink about how to account for long-term influence when we design a safe control algorithms. And so how much time do I have?
You have about another 10 minutes.
Okay, I see. And so then, given the fact that I only have 10 more minutes, I will briefly go over this sensory motor control topic and how safe learning can be used in microfinance to reduce poverty in Africa and contribute to financial inclusion. So when we look at human sensory motor control system for our body are significantly more constrained. For example, the information capacity or how we translate the information and compute, they are all done by electrical impulse or chemical process. So it's not as highly capable as the standard computer sense. And therefore, both in terms of the sensor and the muscle, actuator, humans have a stringent speed and accuracy constraints. And you can feel your speed and accuracy constraints by doing this test, where one is that you are going to look at a moving object. And perhaps for most people, it's very difficult for us to read because it's moving too fast. And this is one of the examples where you can feel actually your body is not so fast and accurate as we can see. On the other hand, you could look at the top letter and shake your head at the same speed as the bottom. And here, very interestingly, you will realize even if the first task and the second task, your size of the disturbance or the frequency of the motion are identical. So the relative frequency of the motion is identical. But the first one is significantly easier for you to do. So this example suggests that, in this human body, you really realize you have this limited speed and accuracy because the first task are what you will be observing for your daily lives. So your system is actually creating these virtual behaviors that we feel we are fast and accurate. But actually our components such as nerve and muscles are slow and inaccurate. And you can realize your body is limited using these very simple examples. And then the next scientific question would be, how does human achieve fast and accurate system using slow and inaccurate behavior? Slow and inaccurate components that are used to produce such control actions. And so actually, despite lots of literature in sensory motor control in neuroscience that talks about the behavior level, how humans move our body. And equally many existing literature that look at the nerve and the component level of our brain. Because these two levels are fundamentally at a very different scale, different community, there are very few literature that even ask this question of how humans achieve fast and accurate or robust and flexible behaviors using small or inaccurate components. So this is another area where I think that people who is in control community or who study system could come and develop models to better understand how human mitigates these deleterious effects coming from imperfect hardware and use these insights to create a system that can work in a highly resource-constrained environment. And so we developed the initial model that connects between these two different levels. And what we find out is that human uses a lot of diversities to create a fast and accurate behavior using components that are either slow and accurate or fast but inaccurate. So here are one examples where if you build a diverse component, you can achieve much better speed and accuracy with respect to when you are only looking at building a uniform component. And then here are other examples where we could reproduce a Fitts model that has been empirically studied a lot and show that with this diversity, we can theoretically show the trade-off that matches with the empirical study. And actually, this diversity-enabled sweet spot has been existed in many different places in nature, such as in these examples, and also in this engineering system as well. So one very simple example in transportation would be, say, I want to go from here to California, and I could either walk and drive and fly. So walking gives me the best accuracy, but it's slow. Flying, I can only land in the airport, so it gives me the worst accuracy, but it's the fastest. By me combining walking and driving to the airport and flying, I can actually create a system as if I am reaching from Pittsburgh to California at the speed of flying and at the accuracy of walking. I think this kind of diversity-enabled sweet spot or the associated biological insights are something we are not intensively studying, but I believe it will have great potential to improve our future autonomous systems or autonomous vehicles. Okay, so that's about what we can learn from human sensor motor control. And finally, I would like to talk about a new application where safe control and safe learning can be used, that is essentially in microfinance. So microfinance is this process where people give a little bit of loans to very disadvantaged people who conventionally won't have access to these kind of loans. And then so this standard finance method developed in standard countries such as US are based on credit scoring system where you need a very well-established credit scores. But microfinance are intended to provide loans to people who do not have access to financial opportunities. And these are mostly the areas that you cannot even produce a accurate credit score, and you don't have a credit scoring system either. But then nonetheless, for us to be useful and then sustainable, we need to control the risk. But in order to control the risk, we need to lend the loan to people and to better understand how these people will return or default and continuously improve our process. So we built an initial model that talks about how microfinance can be modeled using safe learning and control framework. And we hope that this initial model will allow us to better modernizing microfinance process and help the modern machine learning or safe control techniques to be used in poverty reduction or to the type of process or decision making that has been conventionally done using pure experience and human operators. And so we also have shown that you can more effectively look into account for financial inclusion, and that you could bound its robustness in the presence of changes and having a better trade-off of the financial inclusion and the risks. Okay, so that concludes my talk. So I'd like to thank my students who worked on this research that I presented and the co-authors and co-authors. Thank you so much for listening.
Questions from in the room? I have one for you. I think it's really fascinating that you're talking about applying the same methods across autonomous vehicles to microfinance, and what other areas could you maybe use that same process to be able to affect change?
So I think robotics and autonomous vehicles are very well, all the application areas that we know it's there, that we can use safe control and learning. But the economical systems, financial decision-making, economic stability, these kind of things, they require a rigorous robustness study. But then I feel those are some the places where we haven't put enough attention to, but the method can be highly applicable. And another area would be in a highly interactive environment, where the setting there is slightly different from the conventional framework where we are assuming some static system and have a very well known about the outcome. But then actually the system evolves over time, and then there are multi-time scales. And then those are the areas where, although we have a lot of safe learning and control techniques, but requires more, more analysis to capture the long-term influence of human and the computer interactions.
Thank you. And Stan asked online, are you working with any community partners specializing in microfinance?
The microfinance job are the joint work with CMU Africa. We haven't been working with community partners, but we are interested in hearing opportunities if the audience knows.
Another question that came in from the online viewers is about students who are looking at their future and wanting to figure out what's kind of the next step, like based on what you're doing, what could students be pursuing as kind of the next phase?
Is this about the future research direction of the?
Yes.
So I think these are physics informed neural network. It has a lot of potential to be applied to different settings. For example, if you have a reachability or optimum control system, in our context, we are only considered about the quantizing to estimating the risk probability. But in the future, I envision it could be applied to a, say, optimum control, stochastic optimum control, or some other, for example, reinforcement learning, where you can characterize the optimality conditions and use PIN to directly compute the solutions. And another research direction I think that haven't been fully explored is essentially this long-term influence when the human and autonomous vehicles interact. There are so we have been looked into the existing method has made great progress in terms of how to assure safety for the current interaction, but we still don't have a systematic study and a framework to really characterize how the interactions changes over time, and how can we steer the human behaviors to be more collaborative so that the safety in the road in the next year or a decade from now can be reduced, can be improved.
I'm gonna keep asking questions if nobody else is asking questions. I'm just curious, how did you get started in all of this? What interested you personally?
So my group is generally interested in any applications and the fundamental theory of safe learning and control. The first two parts, more of the technical question, we get started on this project based on what we think is missing in the existing body of work. And the last three fundamental rethink more coming from some feeling that we need more, or something that we kind of intuitively know but haven't been formulated or formalized in any rigorous research study. And there we started to look into how can we analyze the situations or different cases more rigorously.
Thank you. Checking online to see, I'm not seeing any hands go up online. How about in here?
Vanessa, so with respect to control that's applied on real-time systems, especially in safety critical applications. So the question I'm.
Could you speak up a little bit?
Sure. So this is with respect to control systems being applied for safety critical applications like autonomous driving. So we are seeing a lot of machine learning being enforced into control these days, like with some of the new algorithms in reinforcement learning especially. But when it comes to that being practically deployed on a real-time microcontroller or a real-time embedded system, how does that hold? Because we see them having some latency in performances, and especially with respect to the compute and with respect to the processing power that is needed for these kind of systems. So how does that translate to like real-time applications and real-time learning?
So the question was like, how does the reinforcement learning and other learning methods translate to real-time applications? So I think certainly depending on how you solve this problem, some are more can be used for real-time applications. Others are more designed to be learned offline and then pick the policy to be used for real-time applications. And but for most of them, the purely data-driven techniques doesn't necessarily can ensure safety, because you doesn't necessarily have enough diversity of data in your observation, and there could be a distributional shift when you actually use your learned controller to the actual system. So those are the areas where I think would be very interesting to combine a model-driven technique or this probabilistic safety certificates, things like that, to ensure these things are going to produce the safe actions with global guarantees.
Maybe all the questions, maybe you want to.
Sure. Well, thank you so much for sharing your work, and to everybody here today, both in person and online, thanks for joining us. As I mentioned earlier, today's presentation will be posted on the Mobility 21 What's Happening page of the website. So if you're interested to revisit any of the information, you can find it online. And then for students who are interested in engaging in transportation topics, just want to promote the Transportation Club on campus is a great way to plug in and get connected with other people who are also interested in the topic. And again, this is our last one for the year. If you're here next year, please keep an eye out. But thank you so much for attending, and yeah, have a good rest of your day. Grab some sandwiches.